Anderson, Content Marketing Specialist with Minitab. Thank you for joining our webinar, What's New in Minitab 19. I'll hand it over to our expert presenter, Marilyn Wheatley, in a few minutes. But first, a few housekeeping notes. The webinar audio is available through your computer. There is no dial-in number. For the best audio quality, please make sure your speakers or headsets are turned on and the volume is up. Some networks cause slides to advance more slowly than others, so you may see a slight delay. You might need to log off your VPN to help with that issue, or try closing GoToWebinar and logging back in. And don't worry, this webinar is being recorded. We'll send you the presentation slides and the recording by email, so if you need to drop off or you'd like to review at a later date, please look out for that email in your inbox. Your mics are muted, but please feel free to enter questions at any time in the questions pane. You should be able to find that on the right side of your screen in GoToWebinar. We do capture all questions, and I will be answering them online along with a couple of my Minitab colleagues. We will also have time for Q&A with Marilyn at the end, so we might hold on to a few questions, especially the ones that benefit everyone to hear. And to make this more interactive, we will have a couple polls throughout. Please answer those in the polling pane in GoToWebinar when you see them come across, as they'll help us guide our conversation today. We will also be sending you a couple of questions after the webinar is over, so we appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to answer those. Now, to introduce our presenter for today, Marilyn Wheatley. Marilyn has been with Minitab since 2010, supporting clients in Spanish, Portuguese, and English about the use of Minitab, statistics, and process improvement. Marilyn received her Six Sigma Black Belt from Arizona State University in 2016. She also has a certificate in Applied Statistics from Penn State and a master's degree in economics from Eastern Michigan University. We have a lot to cover, and we want to make sure we get to your questions. So without further ado, let's let Marilyn show us what's new with Minitab.
Thank you, Shelby, and thanks everyone for joining us. Before we get started today, we have a very relevant poll question to today's topic. You should be seeing that poll question on your screens now. If you could just take a quick moment to respond to our poll question number 1. What version of Minitab Statistical Software do you use? Maybe you've already upgraded to Minitab 19, or maybe you're using a previous version. Maybe you have version 18. A lot of people are still using Minitab 18. Maybe you have Minitab 17, or maybe a previous version even. Or maybe you don't even use Minitab. So possibly this is quite new to you. If you could go ahead and respond to the poll question on your screen, we're going to share these results with everybody. And as Shelby said, this will help us kind of guide the conversation here. So just one more moment. Please go ahead and answer, and we're going to share these results with you here in just a moment. Perfect. So you should see the poll results on your screen now. It looks like most of you are still using Minitab version 18, 56% of you, and almost a quarter of you have already upgraded to version 19. Glad to see that. Hopefully you'll pick up something new in today's presentation. And for those of you that have Minitab 16 or prior, or maybe if you're not using Minitab, you'll see some reasons today why you should consider upgrading or acquiring a Minitab license. So thanks for answering our first poll question. So basically, at Minitab, we believe that everyone in an organization, regardless of their statistical background, is empowered when they have access to easy-to-use analysis tools. And Minitab 19 delivers on our promise to make data analysis easier. What you're going to see in Minitab 19 is faster performance, easier navigation, really allowing better decision-making. So no matter where you are on your analytics journey, Minitab has something for you. So in this session, I'm going to go through some of the different features and improvements that you'll see in Minitab 19. One of the things we've seen over the years is people don't navigate within Minitab as efficiently as maybe we used to think that they did. And one of the big improvements really in version 19 is a better interface, really allowing people to work faster within the application, work smarter really. I'll show you some of the statistical and visualization enhancements and some of the great performance enhancements as well. We'll start out talking about the changes here in PowerPoint, and at the end of the presentation, I'll jump into Minitab 19 so we can see some of these new features in action. So as I mentioned, over the years, we watched people struggle with trying to manage their output, what's in the session window, finding their graphs, and where all that output is. One of the big changes you'll see in Minitab 19 is a better workspace. It's simplified, it's organized, and it's really just easier to navigate. We'll go into some details here. Notice you've got a Navigator pane that's anchored on the left side of the application, and the Navigator can easily be toggled on and off with this button down here in the lower left-hand corner. You've got your worksheets that are displayed as tabs across the bottom. This looks very similar to some other applications that we all know and use. And replacing the session window is the output pane, which now contains all of your analysis output, including your graphs. We also have this new view menu, and we'll go into some more details about that menu and some of the other menu changes a little bit later. So now let's get into some details. So it all starts with the worksheets. As you bring your data into the system, how you view those worksheets, how you add worksheets, how you move around is pretty easy and very familiar. We have these arrows here on the left-hand side that you can use to move left or right to see more worksheets, and you can click that plus sign you see there to add another worksheet. Also, the right mouse click functionality on one of these tab worksheets will allow you to do things like rename the worksheet, duplicate the worksheet, and this is also where you'll find access to the worksheet information, which replaces the show info from the previous project manager toolbar from release 18. So in Minitab 19, the worksheet summary information is displayed as a separate element in the output pane. And that leads us to generating some output. So the output pane replaces the session window. Remember, our session window in version 18 or prior had only text output that you generated, and all of your graphical displays popped up as separate windows, which you needed to navigate, typically using the project manager. Well, we heard from a lot of users that they really didn't like how that made things a little more difficult for them. It wasn't so easy to manage that output. So in release 19, all the output that you generate from a command stays in one window. So any model fitting, text output, graphical displays are all displayed within a single item in the Navigator. This will make it much easier to view and interpret your results. Another important element of output is knowing when it's out of date. So if your data changes, you want to know. It was always easy on our graphs to know when a graph was out of date in previous versions. You'd look at the icon in the upper left-hand corner of the graph. But really that wasn't so easy for session window output. In version 19, that's no longer the case. In Minitab 19, you can see that for each piece of output, the worksheet name is at the top, and in this case, measurements, but also when your data changes, you'll get a notification. You can update those results, and if we can't update your results, you'll see a message that says these results are out of date. So you'll have the update option for results that are updatable, and for results that are not updatable, such as an ANOVA, you'll still know when those results are not using the current data in the worksheet. The other thing we have is this context menu. You can right mouse click to access the same functionality, making it easier to navigate and manage that output. So this is where you'll find the familiar options to export or copy a graph and some of the other graph editing options. Another important element of output is when your data changes, you might want to update it. You usually would. In Minitab 19, we've added more updatable commands. So not only will you know when your results are out of date, you'll have more options to be able to update those results without having to rerun the command. So in release 18 or prior, you already had the ability to update control charts and most of the graphs from the graph menu. But in Minitab 19, we've added the ability to update some of your favorite tools like the graphical summary, Pareto charts, capability analysis, and probability plots. So again, this saves you time and allows you to be more efficient rather than having to recreate those results when the data changes. And when it comes time to manage all that output, that's what the Navigator is for. So the Navigator is anchored on the left side of the application. It can be easily toggled on and off, and it gives you a view of your output. You can group the output by worksheet and sort it oldest to newest, newest to oldest, or by command name. Use command name if you'd like to sort the results in alphabetical order. And again, that view of the Navigator can easily be toggled on and off to maximize your workspace. You can also collapse the view by each worksheet, so you can really get a lot of output and be able to see and manage everything really easily. Another key improvement in Release 19 is the new Split View option. So when you're looking at results in previous releases of Minitab in the session window, if you wanted to do a side-by-side model comparison, it was a little bit difficult. You'd have to look up one set of results, copy and maybe paste them over into Word, then scroll up and down the session window to find the second set of results and maybe line them up to compare side by side. Well, now in Release 19, simply right mouse click on the output in the Navigator pane and choose Open and Split View. That will provide a side-by-side view of your results. And you can easily split that as many times as you want. I'd say the most common case is a side-by-side view, but there's a lot of flexibility there. I'll demonstrate that at the end of the session. So the new Navigator, the interface, the worksheets, your output, it's a very familiar interface, and at the same time, it's much improved. It's friendlier for existing Minitab users, and it's easier to use for new users. And now that brings us to our second poll question of today. If you would, please take a look at the question on your screen, and if you would just take a moment to respond, we'd really appreciate it. This will be really nice to show all of you the breakdown of the audience. We'll share the results of this poll once everyone has a moment to respond. So in what area do you use Minitab Statistical Software? Is it quality? Could be reliability engineering, product development, business analytics, or process validation. Please select the one that most closely applies to your work with Minitab if you would. And we realize that maybe we should have another option for other, because maybe you don't fall into one of these categories. But if you would make the most appropriate selection, we'd appreciate it, and we'll share those results with you momentarily. Also, stay tuned at the end of the webinar if you'd like to add any further comments on how you use it. We'll have another question about this in the exit survey. Excellent. So here we see the results of the second poll. It looks like most of you are using Minitab currently for quality. Not surprised there. Commonly, Minitab is used in quality and continuous improvement. Looks like a lot of you are using Minitab for process validation as well. Also, a fair number of you using Minitab for product development and business analytics, and maybe fewer people using it for reliability. Great, thanks so much for taking the time to answer that poll question. And let's go ahead and continue. Now let's talk about some of the statistical improvements in Minitab version 19. There are quite a few additions. We're going to start with some of the visualizations that we've added. This is something I think is very important to users when people are analyzing data, is being able to create a visual of the results to share with other people on their teams or with management. So we'll talk about a few of these and some of the other improvements that are going to help make your analysis easier. So when we calculate a correlation coefficient, remember that a correlation measures the degree of linear association between two variables. It's always important to take a look at the graph to visualize that correlation value. Minitab provides now by default a scatter plot. So when you ask for correlation, you'll get the scatter plot as well. The graph also shows the correlation coefficient and a confidence interval for the correlation. So in previous versions of Minitab, you could get the Pearson correlation value, but you would have to generate a scatter plot separately if you wanted to visualize that number. So now in Minitab 19 saves you time by automatically displaying the graph with your results. And if you enter multiple variables, the graph is a scatter plot matrix for every pair of variables. The new correlation window also includes an option to display a correlation, a pairwise correlation matrix for every pair of variables, and the matrix includes a p-value to test the significance of each correlation. Okay, and even though here we're showing you the Pearson correlation, you can choose what type of correlation you want, just as with previous versions of Minitab. So regression analysis, this is one of the most helpful improvements, in my opinion. Regression analysis now includes a Pareto chart so you can visualize those significant effects very easily or share those results with other people. So the Pareto chart will appear at the bottom of your model fit in the output pane. And this was the result of a lot of feedback that we received from users like you. Previously, Minitab had a Pareto effects plot for the DOE menu, but we heard from a lot of users that needed a visual way to show those significant terms when they present their results to their teams. So this is one of several features that was added because it was a popular request from our users. One thing I'd say is that you should never feel like you're stuck. Feel free to contact Minitab technical support. The help using Minitab is included with your license. And when you can't find a feature you need, sometimes tech support has a workaround they can offer. If there's no workaround, the request is logged in a database that our developers check when they prioritize new features to add to Minitab. So please contact us. We value your input and your feedback. Okay, so we made a modeling improvement. In linear models, including regression, general linear models, and DOE, so when you use stepwise, Minitab already had several options for automated model selection, removing terms that aren't significant. So now we've added another option for automatic model selection, the model selection criteria. So when you're using a stepwise approach to fit your models, we've added a forward information criteria method, which uses AIC, or Akaike's information criteria, or optionally BIC, or Bayesian information criteria. So this is a more modern approach to model selection, and both AIC and BIC are penalized likelihood criteria, which penalizes your model for having too many terms in it, basically. So this is just one more option to help you when you're fitting models using Minitab 19. We've also added the ability to analyze a binary response for designed experiments. So you may be thinking to yourself, well, Minitab already had that functionality in the binary logistic regression menu. And that's true, but now we have that option under factorial designs. So you'll see this option for screening designs and response surface designs as well. And what it does is it makes it really easy to analyze that data. And if you have a DOE with both continuous and binary responses, you can do a joint optimization very easily with this new option. Joint optimization of a binary and continuous response wasn't possible before, since you'd have to fit your model to the binary response separately in the binary logistic regression menu. So that's just one more helpful option in version 19, being able to simultaneously optimize continuous and binary responses in the DOE menu. We also made quite a few enhancements to normal capability. I'll let you read through each item on the list, but basically the changes make it much easier for you when you're creating capability results and are getting ready to prepare some reports. I think the biggest change here is maybe the last item on this list, the global option to display ppm or percent effective and to display confidence intervals. So in previous versions of Minitab, Minitab showed ppm by default, and there was no global option to show percent effective instead. So you'd have to make that selection each time you went to this analysis window. But now there's a global option for that, so you don't need to make that change every time you run capability analysis, and you can get the percent effective instead of ppm by default. The other big change here was related to the 1- and 2-sided confidence intervals. So previously, you could choose a 2-sided confidence interval or have an upper confidence bound or a lower bound. So now Minitab 19 has just 2 options, 1- or 2-sided confidence intervals. So the two-sided option is the same, but the one-sided I really like because it gives you the worst side of the distribution depending on the metric. So for CPK and PPK, selecting one-sided gives us only the lower bound interval. So that's the worst side, right? The worst case scenario for CPK or PPK. And for PPM or percent defective, Minitab 19 gives you the upper bound. So that's the highest we'd expect defective parts per million or percent defective to be. So that's the worst case scenario for PPM or percent defective. We've also added a bootstrapping and randomization test. This option is available under Calc Resampling. And while this was really slated mostly for our academic customers who teach bootstrapping and are teaching students about sampling distributions, it also has some commercial applications. One example would be if you're trying to estimate a confidence interval and the assumptions on which that interval is based aren't met. So for example, that graphical summary on the left side of your screens there, I have a confidence interval for the standard deviation. And that's based on normally distributed data. And you can see in the histogram for that summary report that this data isn't normal. So probably that interval isn't so great. So in that case, you could, as another option, take a bootstrap sample and calculate the interval as well. Minitab will take 1,000 samples with replacement from the original sample to come up with a bootstrap interval showed on the, or displayed on the graph on the right-hand side. So a confidence interval for a standard deviation based on data that looks more like the graph on the right side is probably a little better based on a more normally distributed data as shown on the right side. Like I said, this is mostly used academically, but it also has some limited useful commercial applications. So we made some nice improvements, really simplifying that interface while also adding some performance enhancements. So let's talk about these enhancements next. So first off, we really improved the way that we do editing and brushing on graphs. So when you double click on a graph, it's going to pop out in a graph editing window, and you'll be able to make all of your graph edits there. Same thing with brushing display, except that's also a little bit easier now. So if you ever use the option to set ID variables in previous versions of Minitab, you know that that was probably a little difficult to discover, or maybe you didn't even know about it until you saw it in a Minitab training class. So now as soon as you go into brush mode, you'll see different columns that are available, and it's very easy to add more. The other thing that's nice is when you're brushing points on the graph, the worksheet will come into focus and you'll be able to see the corresponding rows in your worksheet view. So we made some menu improvements. Really, we simplified some of the clutter that we had in our menus. So previously, in version 18 and prior, we had the edit menu, but we also had an editor menu. And when we asked people what was under those, it was really hard for them to say. So in version 19, editor, tools, and Windows menus were removed, and that functionality was rearranged and moved to other places to be more discoverable and more usable for our customers. So as an example of options, so options used to be under tools menu and then options. We moved options underneath the file menu because a more standard design practice is that options or preferences are really found under the file menu. Okay? So those are just some of the improvements that we've made as far as the menus go. We also added a new view menu, and that new view menu helps you with navigation within the interface. So if you prefer a drop-down menu, you can easily use this view menu option. However, some of these options are also available in other parts of the new interface. For example, the options to view only the data, view output only, or view data and output, that's also available in the lower right-hand corner of the new interface, as is the option to zoom. Okay, but if you prefer a drop-down menu, this is where you can find these options. And this is also where you're going to find access to the new command line and history. So that brings us to our next feature change. So we improved the way that the command line and history is discovered and the way you interact with it. So when you bring this option up from the View menu, you'll see the command line on the right side along with the history window in a single pane. You'll be able to highlight some of the code from the history window and copy it to the command line using the button that you see on your screens there. So this will make it easier to code or create macros if that's something you like to do. If you need to rerun a command, for example, you made a graph, you want to make just a few changes without going back through the menus, you could copy those commands, paste them into the command line, make your slight modifications, and then rerun those commands. So really just easier to use the command line in history in a single pane. It's a lot more accessible and user-friendly. We also made some significant performance enhancements. And before we talk about these enhancements, we need to talk about the fact that we have new file formats. So the file formats, not super exciting, but because Minitab 19 went through such an overhaul, updating and changing those file extensions was really needed. So project extensions are changing in release 19. They are now MWX, and the worksheets are now MWX, excuse me. The new project extensions are MPX and worksheets are MWX. So Minitab 19 can of course open older projects. We can open projects from Minitab 18, 17, and as far back as Minitab 16. Same thing applies with the worksheets. However, when you open a Minitab project from a previous version into version 19 and you hit the save button, that project is going to save as an MPX. It's not going to save over the previous MPJ file. Same thing with the worksheets. It's going to save in the new format from Minitab 19. Great, so here are some of the performance enhancements that are part of Minitab 19. The first one being that Minitab 19 is now available in 64-bit. So up until version 18, Minitab was available only as a 32-bit application, which tended to pose some challenges for customers that were working with larger data sets. But now Minitab 19 is available in 32-bit, but also 64-bit. So that allows you to use more of the available memory on your computer, all of it actually, which I've confirmed with our development team. So I can tell you from experience in testing this out, you can fit models a lot faster, generate graphs much faster. We've also made some improvements in terms of performance. So beyond availability in 64-bit, you're going to see some serious improvements in the way linear models are handled. So basically being able to analyze and run these algorithms faster. So regression, logistic regression, Poisson regression, and stepwise, you'll see much better performance even with much larger data sets. Also, Excel files are going to open faster in Minitab 19. And as I mentioned, graphs are rendering faster in Minitab 19 compared with version 18, even with much larger data sets. So really, this is all part of our commitment to our customers. We realize that data is getting bigger. We realize that our customers have the same or similar problems to solve, but maybe in different ways. Data from sensors and the digital transformation is bringing large amounts of data to our customers, and it's important that we have an application that can handle that. And these are just some of our first steps to keep with our commitment. And in version 19, we're also committed to the Mac. So with release 19, Minitab will also have a Mac version. A lot of academic and commercial customers use Mac systems, so this will be a great addition to our product offering. A word of caution to you Mac aficionados, I'm a Mac user at home myself. This is our first Mac version in quite a few years, decades even. So it actually does not have all the full feature set of the Windows version. So most of the analysis and commands are available, but there are a lot of options that are not available for Mac just yet. This was our development's team first attempt at a Mac version of Minitab. And although it doesn't have all the full feature set, they felt it was really important to get a Mac version of Minitab into our users' hands and then take that VOC, that feedback, as they prioritize what will be added in the next update. So I'd invite you to check out Minitab 19 from Mac as well, and we welcome your feedback on features that you think should be added next. And lastly, the new file formats, the MPX and MWX are compatible across platforms. So if you have Windows users and Mac users at your organization, those files can easily be shared between Windows and Mac. Great, so with that, let me jump over to Minitab so I can show you some of these new features in action. All right, so here we have Minitab 19. Here's my Navigator pane on the left-hand side. Again, that can be toggled on and off with this button in the lower left-hand corner if I'd like to go ahead and maximize my workspace. And here at the top of the Navigator, I have this arrow. This is where I can make my selection to group the commands by worksheet. I'm going to remove it and then put it back. And so here you can see I've got a worksheet titled Beltware, and you can see all of the output that I generated from that specific worksheet. I can also sort these worksheets, sort the output within worksheet by newest to oldest, oldest to newest, or by command name. So that basically is the alphabetical option here. The other thing I can do is I can collapse output by worksheet. So really, if I have quite a bit of output, I can just focus in on the current worksheet if I'd like to do that. We also have the tabbed worksheets down here at the bottom. As I mentioned, we can use the arrows to move further to the right to make more worksheets visible. The other thing that I hadn't mentioned is it's easy to reorganize the worksheets. I can just click and drag to move and just release to drop the worksheet where I'd like it to be organized here. I can also hit plus if I want to add a worksheet. That's where I'm going to find the delete worksheet option. And remember, right click also gives us the option for worksheet information. If I make that selection, you can see that I'm obtaining summary output for the current worksheet. At the very top, Minitab 19 lets me know that I use the Beltware worksheet to generate this output. And here's some summary information, including the columns, the count of rows. It would show if I had missing variables. And here I can see that column C1 is a text column denoted by the T on the left side. Also, you can see that this is a single element listed here in the Navigator pane, this worksheet information, and it's listed under the Beltware worksheet because I have my Navigator sorted by worksheet. All right, I also want to show you that the output pane now includes both graphs and your stats output. So if I wanted to quickly maybe display some descriptive statistics, just pick a couple of variables. That's okay, we'll leave all of those selections and maybe I'll just make a couple of graphs. And if I click OK, down here in the bottom right is where I can choose if I want to see data and output, worksheet only, or output only. Those options are also available from the View menu at the top. But here you can see my statistical output is displayed side by side with my graphs. And the way the graphs are displayed really just depends on the size of your monitor. You can easily click and drag a graph within this output window to make it a little bit bigger. This is also where you're going to find the options to export to PowerPoint or Word that all of you were familiar with. We can right-click on the graph or use this context menu that comes out here from the right-hand side. So another important element of output is that side-by-side comparison that I mentioned with the split view. So now I have this output and maybe I want to compare it with some other output that I had already generated. I'm going to go ahead and right-click on a second set of output because these descriptive statistics are already selected and displayed. And here I have the option to open in split view. And here you can see I'm comparing side by side. We could add a third if we wanted in split view. And once you are in split view, you can also just easily click and drag these tabs at the top and then drop where it's highlighted to rearrange the order of display. Exiting split view is also easy. I'm just clicking the button on the right-hand side to close that out. One other thing that I think a lot of people had requested is related to the Pareto chart. During the presentation, I had mentioned that more commands are now updatable. I'm going to go here to this Pareto chart, and we're going to go ahead and update it. This was generated from this worksheet because I can easily see that here from the top, and it was a Pareto chart of the vehicle color. And I'm just going to change one of the categories. And right away, here you can see the message that Minitab gives me. It's warning me that the results do not use the current data. And the two options are update the current graph, or I have also the second option. I can create new results based on the updated data. And in that case, this graph is going to remain. So here we go under parking violations on the left-hand side. You can now see that I've got two different graphs, so I can do a side-by-side if I'd like to compare those. The other thing that's was quite a significant change was graph editing, which I had mentioned previously. I'm going to go to my little scatter plot here to demonstrate this while I show you the new brushing. So if I double click on this graph, as I mentioned, it comes up in a new graph editing window. I can make that a little bit bigger. I have all of the familiar graph editing options here that were available previously. I can click on points on the graph or right click to add or select. This is where you're going to access the new brushing functionality that I'd mentioned. So if I click brush, notice that right away, Minitab switched to the worksheet that was used to generate this graph. It's called Beltware. And automatically, these brush rows pane appears on the right-hand side. So as I highlight points here, not only is Minitab right away showing me what row that belongs to, you can see in the background that this worksheet came into focus. So Minitab 19 is trying to show me the rows that I highlighted from the worksheet. Here we go, row 53 is highlighted. So I have the details here, and I can easily go ahead and change what columns are displayed as I brush, assuming I had perhaps more variables in this worksheet. Okay. The other nice thing about this new editing pane here is I have this button at the top that I can use to copy the command language. So if I had made several edits to this graph and now I wanted to reproduce the graph, maybe with some slight modifications, I can click there. I've copied those commands, and now we can go to View, Command Line History, and I can use Control V to paste the commands that were used to create this graph, and I can easily just hit Run to create another graph like it, or an edited graph if I'd made changes to the options that were selected when that graph was created. All right, perfect. So that's what I wanted to show you for our demonstration of some of the new Minitab features in action. So let's pop back over to PowerPoint for our third poll question of today. Our third poll question. So would you like to set up a one-on-one conversation on upgrading to Minitab 19 or acquiring a Minitab license? Yes or no? If you would, just take a quick moment to respond. So really, we're not going to share these results with everybody. This is just if you want to follow up after this presentation. When we've done these webinars the last few times, a lot of attendees asked us at the end who to contact for pricing. So we're trying to be a little more proactive this time. So please answer this last poll question again, but we won't be sharing these results. We'll just follow up with you if you ask us to follow up. So thanks to everybody for answering. If you said yes, we'll follow up with you after the webinar. If you did not say yes and change your mind, or if you didn't get a chance to answer, please go to minitab.com and hit Talk to Minitab, or visit minitab.com/support to find more contact information. Just another moment on that last poll question. Before we move on, perfect, thank you for answering. So just a couple more enhancements. We've made some changes to Quality Trainer. For those of you that don't know Quality Trainer, this is our online e-learning course that teaches quality statistics and how to apply those concepts using Minitab Statistical Software. It includes animated lessons. So QT was updated. It's got a nicer, sleeker interface. It's also offered now in Spanish, Chinese, and Portuguese. Previously, this was only available in English, so that'll be a really nice offering for global teams. And now Quality Trainer also runs as HTML on modern browsers. Quality Trainer no longer uses Flash, so really you can see this on a lot of devices. For those of you that are Mac users, this is compatible with Mac, as is our new Minitab Mac version. We've also made some nice improvements in the way that Minitab and Companion work with each other. So if you're not too familiar with Companion, that's Minitab's solution for organizing and managing quality improvement projects. So starting with Companion version 5.3, which is now available, you'll be able to send your output from Minitab directly to Companion. So you have, many of you have seen the context menu that I showed within this presentation. So besides the options to export to Word or PowerPoint, you can now output to Companion as well. We'll be able to insert Minitab projects right into our Companion roadmap, and those Minitab projects will become part of the Companion project file. And the other great improvement is in Monte Carlo simulations. This is my favorite personally. So now we can import models from Minitab 19 directly into Companion to use for simulations. So before Minitab 19, you would have had to manually enter your transfer equation into Companion to start the simulation, but now you can directly import your models from Minitab 19 files. All right, so really, no matter where you are on your analytics journey, whether it's visualizations, describing data, maybe doing some inferential statistics or some predicting, Minitab is designed to help you at every stage because Minitab is easy to use. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Shelby to say a few quick words about Minitab and our company and products while I review the Q&A, and I'll be back to answer some of the questions that you submitted through the chat. Shelby?
Thanks so much, Marilyn. The great thing about these What's News webinars is a lot of you are familiar with Minitab, both as a company and Minitab Statistical Software, and we appreciate it. Just in case you are not familiar with us, I just want to say a few words about Minitab. For nearly 50 years, Minitab has been a leading software provider of quality improvement and statistical analysis software. Minitab Statistical Software has been used in implementing countless improvement initiatives all around the world. We help out 9 of the top 10 Fortune 500 companies and over half of the Fortune 500 overall. So you can take a look at some of these logos on this screen and the next of just some of our different clients we've worked with over the years. In addition to Minitab Statistical Software for data analysis, we offer a few other products, which Marilyn has kind of covered, but we'll go over them again here. SPM is also known as Salford Predictive Modeler, which is our platform for machine learning and predictive analytics. Next, with a little bit of orange, is Companion by Minitab, which is our continuous improvement project management. And then finally, it's Quality Trainer, an online statistics e-learning course with animated lessons, quizzes, and hands-on exercises to help you easily learn statistics and how to use Minitab Statistical Software. We offer training year-round in our services area, as well as the option to bring a Minitab trainer to your company to teach your staff. You can learn more about this in our statistical consulting services at minitab.com/training. I'd also encourage you to explore minitab.com/support, where you can find helpful videos on all our software, contact information for our world-class technical support team, access to our blog, different data sets, online help documentation, and so much more. We'll include those links in the presentation we send out in just a few days. And on the next slide, last but not least, we invite you to join us in October at the 2019 Minitab Insights Conference. Our flagship user conference brings together professionals of all levels on their data analysis journey, whether they're just beginners or experts in data analysis, quality, continuous improvement, reliability. and just key decision makers overall. 5 whys you would benefit from attending include the chance to expand your knowledge by hearing from accomplished thought leaders, learn effective ways to achieve powerful, realistic results through data analysis, discover the future of Minitab software by testing upcoming enhancements and our new products at our user-centered design studio. Now that you've learned a little bit about Minitab 19, for those of you that haven't upgraded yet, come test it out in person for yourself at our Minitab lab. And then last but not least, you'll be able to maximize your time out of the office because you'll have access to all our presentation recordings, regardless if you are able to attend them in person or not. We'll have plentiful networking opportunities, and there's also an option to join our second annual golf tournament. Now for a little bit of fun. For further information on our conference, visit info.minitab.com/insights. Now I'm going to hand it back over to Marilyn to kick off our Q&A.
Great, thanks for that, Shelby. And so it looks like most of the questions through the chat have been answered, but one that seemed to come up quite a few times was regarding Quality Trainer. So that is a separate product. It's not part of Minitab, but it works with Minitab. So after you work through a lesson, a statistical concept is explained with a video and an example. You'll see another video that shows you what steps to take to analyze your data in Minitab. Then there's an opportunity to open that same sample data worksheet in Minitab to try it out for yourself. So while it works with Minitab, it's not part of Minitab Statistical Software, so it is a separate product. Somebody else also asked if Companion is a separate product. That is a separate product, and it can be used with or without Minitab. Okay. Some of the other questions that I heard somebody, it looks like somebody had asked whether the capability analysis 6-pack is automatically updated once new data is added to the worksheet. I can confirm that indeed that is the case. Let's just run a quick capability analysis so I can show you how that works. Under Stat, Quality Tools, Capability 6-pack, we'll just pick normal for the fun of it. We're going to do it on this humidity column. Say the subgroup size is 1, and my lower spec, which I'm totally making up, is 65, and upper is 75. Really just to help you see that this is also an updatable command now. Here we have the option to update these results or create new results. All right. So that works. Another question that I saw come through was somebody that had Minitab version 18 and they like to copy all of their session output and paste it externally as opposed to just individual elements. And what I think this person was asking is, for example, if we take a look at this output, here I've got all of these tables in Minitab 18, the person could copy just this section and send that out, but they couldn't copy everything, including any graphs. In Minitab 19, that option's available over here on the far right. So if I copy from here, I'm copying all of the elements of this output, including the graphs. So I could just export to Word, PowerPoint, or Companion, or I can choose the option to copy, and that does copy all of the elements from the session window. Okay, somebody's asking for pricing on Quality Trainer. I'll let sales follow up with you. Thanks for your question. Looks like we've got a few more licensing questions. And I don't see that we have any other questions about the software. My colleague Eric, who also works with me sometimes in technical support, has been doing such a great job of answering everybody's questions here. Trying to read a few more of the questions as they're coming in, so bear with me, please. Yes, so somebody is asking if they have older training files. You're currently using Minitab 17 and you have a lot of older files as far back as maybe 2006 or earlier. So you're asking about how to use those files with Minitab 19. Don't worry, you're not out of luck and you nailed it. That is the answer if it's an older file. So with each version, we're dropping support for a really old version file formats of Minitab. So as I mentioned, version 19 can open files as far back as Minitab 16. Well, Minitab 18 can open, I think, as far back as 14 and so on. So if you have Minitab 17, I would recommend that you go ahead, open those files, and just hit the Save button, whether you're saving the worksheet or if you're saving the project file. Saving it in version 19 guarantees that you'll be able to open that file again once you upgrade to 19. Okay, so good question. Thank you for that. Somebody else is asking if there were any changes in the assistant menu in version 19. There were no changes specifically to the assistant menu. One thing to note is I mentioned we have a Minitab 19 Mac version that has most but not all of the features as the Windows version. And one notable exception as far as features go on Minitab 19 for Mac is that the assistant is not available in the Mac version. But other than that, no changes in the assistant. So thanks for that question. A few more questions here. Let's see. Somebody's asking what's the difference when you use a worksheet versus a project. So the worksheet, if you notice here in my Minitab that I'm showing you, I have all of these worksheets across the bottom. So if I use the File menu and choose Save Worksheet As, I could save this as a Minitab worksheet, but maybe I also want to just save this data in this specific worksheet in an Excel format or a CSV. Maybe I want to share this with a person that doesn't have Minitab. This would be the way to do that. So that's saving a worksheet versus if you do go to the File menu and select Save Project, that saves everything that's associated with this file, including all of the worksheets and any output that I generated, plus all of these commands, history of the commands that I ran in Minitab 19. So that saves a project, saves all of the elements of the file together, and a worksheet is just saving the data in the specifically selected worksheet. So thanks for that question. Let me take a look here. It looks like we have a few more questions. Okay, somebody had questions about Monte Carlo simulation and companion. It's super easy. We'll definitely follow up with you. Thanks for that. Are there video tutorials? Somebody's asking, they say they have Minitab 19 currently, and is there a video tutorial available that a licensed person can access? So there are a few short videos that are more general that were made specifically for Minitab 19. However, if you're looking to introduce 19 to users at your company, I would recommend checking the webinars page on minitab.com. This webinar, or some version of it, was recorded and is available for viewing at your convenience. So I would say that's the best place to start. Other than that, I would also recommend, for example, I'm just going to pick one of the new features. If I go here to Calc Resampling and pick Bootstrapping for one sample function, for any of the new features that were outlined in this presentation, and we do have a list of the new features available on the website, if you do go ahead and click on the Help button, that is going to give you some directed help with that selected command. So again, this is a new feature and you can read about it. You can see an overview, data considerations, including an example, again, only for that specific command. So thanks for your question on that. Let me just take a look and see what other questions have come in. Someone's asking about the help. That is quite similar in Minitab 19 as it was in version 18. And I know for an upcoming release, our documentation team is working on making some changes to make the help a little bit more user-friendly and easier to navigate. We did hear from a lot of users that liked the embedded help in versions 17 and prior, or at least they liked how that was organized a little bit better. So I look forward to some of those enhancements, but at this point, version 19's help is organized in a really similar way as version 18. Yes, somebody asked if there is a place where they can click to learn about the results, and absolutely. So anytime I have some output here, for example, here I have a general linear model, and this drop-down arrow off to the far right, I have this help button. So if I choose that, and again, this is for any output, it's going to open to our online help page that gives you an interpretation of the output for that specific command. In this example, fit general linear model. So you could scroll down, or you could use these jump links, go to jump down this same page and see something that is more specific. For example, if you wanted to know, how to assess the model fit, I could click on step 2, and this brings me down here to taking a look at R squared. Maybe I want to check some of the assumptions, right? Like normal residuals, what patterns to look for. You can get all of those details here in the online help. So thanks for that question. And let's see, maybe we have time for another question or two. Bear with me while I try to read some more of your questions. Somebody's asking about the assistant menu. There were no new features added. Again, in version 19, the assistant menu is the same as it was in version 18, if you had that. All right. Looks like somebody's asking if we have a help module of Minitab that's specific for tools that they use, like validation and verification purposes. There isn't a specific training module based on industry, but a lot of the examples that are built into the help are industry specific. So they might not be related specifically to process validation, but there is an example for every tool within Minitab. I'll just stay with this just because it's already on my screen. So this was directed help interpreting the specific bit of output, but for every command, if you hit the help button, on the left-hand side, you have this overview of the command. So it kind of tells you what it's for, the use cases, you know, when you would use this type of analysis, data considerations, so what type of data do I need, what assumptions do I need to meet, and also we have an example, so you could download that data set, follow the steps to create the output following the example, and read through that interpretation. So hopefully that would help you apply that specific command to your situation or your specific scenario. Okay, I think maybe a couple more questions. One question that somebody is asking is, can all graphs be sent to PowerPoint now? And I'm sorry to say that that is not currently possible. So if you create several graphs using a single command, for example, if you have the data, I think I created this graph earlier when we did descriptive statistics, right? I had a bivariable, so I had stacked data. So the only workaround would be if it's the same graph and you're using stacked data to create the graph, then all of those graphs are displayed as a single item in the Navigator pane, and then you have this send to PowerPoint or Word. But unfortunately, it isn't possible to highlight multiple items in the Navigator to export those specifically selected graphs to PowerPoint. I know we have received some feedback about that, and our development team is working to address that in a future version of Minitab. So thanks for your feedback. And I think that's it for questions. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Shelby, and thank you all again so much for attending this session of What's New in Minitab 19.
Well, thank you everybody for joining today and hearing what's new with Minitab 19. Have a great rest of your day.